A blind woman accidentally collides with a Korean mafia boss. He becomes determined to protect her forever. Dalila's white cane tapped the polished stone of the plaza. 3 taps. Pause. 2 more. She counted because counting was how she moved. Through crowds, through corridors, through a world that had gone dark 4 years ago and never bothered to apologize. 36 steps from the subway exit to the glass doors of Daesung Financial Tower. 45 more to the cafe where her friend was waiting. She had walked this route 11 times. She knew it the way some people know a song, not by reading it but by feeling it in the body. Today, something was different. A crowd surged out of the tower's entrance. Loud, sudden, spreading sideways like water finding every gap. Dalila paused. Her cane swept left, then right. The gap she expected wasn't there. The current of people had shifted the path she'd memorized by 3 degrees. Invisible to anyone watching, everything to her. She adjusted. She didn't know the adjustment was wrong. She thought she was angling around the crowd. She was walking directly into the center of it, into the wide, open clearing where men in suits moved with the particular purposefulness of people whose time costs more per minute than most people earn in an hour. The stone underfoot was smoother here, more polished. The acoustics changed. Dalila felt it before she understood it. Then she collided with something solid. Not a pillar, not a door, person. The impact was direct and immediate. Her shoulder hit a chest, broad, unmovable, and the paper coffee cup she'd been carrying since the subway crumpled between them. The lid gave. Hot espresso hit fabric with a sound she'd heard before. That soft, expensive hiss of liquid absorbing into something that cost more than her monthly rent. 3 people reacted. A woman somewhere to her left pulled in a sharp breath through her teeth. A man behind her muttered something low in Korean. A third voice, farther away, whispered, "Oh no," with the energy of someone watching a car crash in slow motion. Then silence. The particular, loaded kind of silence that doesn't fall because nothing is happening, but because everyone in range has frozen to see what happens next. Dalila reached forward, recorder strap swinging from her shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she said, voice steady, hand outstretched. "I didn't see." She stopped herself. The words landed the way they always did. She exhaled once, quietly. She said, "I literally didn't see." She braced for what always came next. It followed a pattern 3 years of blindness had catalogued it with uncomfortable precision. Some people apologized too much. Some went awkward and stiff. Some just walked away. Apology, discomfort, departure. In her experience, those were the only 3 exits from a moment like this. A voice spoke, low, calm. Not from above her, from her level, which meant he was tall but not crouching, not performing concern. "It's all right." That was it.
No apology.
No performance.
No rapid social retreat.
Dalila heard something else behind the words. Not anger. Not even patience. Something quieter than both. Curiosity. She heard shuffling nearby. 2 sets of feet, heavy, trained, shifted forward in her direction. They stopped. She didn't hear a word spoken, but they stopped. "I can pay for the dry cleaning," she said, reaching into her bag. "Please, if you give me a number." "That won't be necessary." Dalila paused. She had learned to hear intention in a voice the way sighted people read a face. Condescension had a particular flatness to it. Pity had a softness that curled at the edges, slightly damp. Impatience had a rhythm that wanted to be finished. This voice had none of those. She heard him crouch, the subtle shift of weight, the quiet displacement of air, and then his hand was near hers, picking up the fallen cup before she could find it. Their fingers brushed. Brief, accidental. Dalila stood straight. "Thank you," she said simply. She didn't know his name. She didn't know that the 2 men who'd stepped forward wore earpieces and had never once been told to stop. She didn't know that the crowd around them had thinned. Not because people were leaving, but because they were being very careful not to be noticed watching. She didn't know that the man standing in front of her had not crouched down for another human being in public in years, possibly ever. She only knew that his voice was warm, and that he wasn't walking away. She turned her cane toward the path she thought was the cafe. Wrong direction. She stilled. The cafe you're heading to, the calm voice said. It's behind you. 42 steps, not 45. There's construction blocking the original route. You'd have hit the barrier at 39. Dalila pressed her lips together. She hated being corrected. She hated that she needed it. She hated, most of all, that he was right. She had felt the sound change underfoot near the barrier 2 days ago and forgotten. Fine, she said. Thank you. She turned. She made it 3 steps before he spoke again. May I walk with you? I don't need an escort. I know. Dalila stopped. 3 years of navigating without sight had taught her many things. The most important, warmth was almost impossible to fake, and this man's voice was warm in a way that didn't ask for anything in return. It wasn't the warmth of someone managing her. It was the warmth of someone who was simply, inexplicably interested. She didn't say yes. She just slowed her pace, and he fell into step beside her. He didn't take her arm. What Dalila didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the man walking quietly beside her controlled more of Seoul than she would ever be comfortable knowing, and that before she had made it 20 steps, he had already decided something about her that no amount of his power, his father's warnings, or the threat quietly forming in the shadows of his world would be able to undo. Before we go any further, if you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And if you've been here before, you already know we don't do surface level. We go all the way in. Drop a comment below. Team Dalila or Team Donghyun? Let's see where you stand before this story changes your mind. Now, let's get into it. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand what happened between Dalila Adebola and Kang Donghyun, to understand why one collision on a Tuesday afternoon set off a chain of events that would shake the foundations of one of South Korea's most feared dynasties, you need to know who she was before she walked into his world, and who he was before she made him question it. The report arrived in 47 minutes. Donghyun was still in the elevator when his intelligence chief sent the first file. By the time he reached the 53rd floor and settled behind his desk, a full profile was waiting. Printed, flagged, and paper-clipped with the particular efficiency of a team that had learned never to keep him waiting twice. He didn't open it immediately. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling window instead, looking down at the plaza below. The crowds had thinned. The stone walkway gleamed under the afternoon light, empty now except for a food vendor packing up his cart near the eastern corner. She was already gone. He turned to the desk and opened the file. Dalila Adebola, age 27, Nigerian national, graduate student, Department of Media Studies, Yonsei University. Current visa status, valid. Criminal record, none. Political affiliations, none. Financial status, modest. Primary income source, freelance voice narration and audio translation contracts with international media companies. He read further. Academic background, top of her journalism cohort, Unilag, Lagos. Awarded 2 competitive scholarships. Profiled in 3 student publications before graduation. Described by faculty as, and the word underlined by his analyst, exceptional. Then the next line. Lost vision in a traffic accident during final semester. Age 23. Has not returned to Nigeria since. Donghyun set the page down. He had ordered investigations on rival chairmen, government officials, a sitting deputy minister, and at least 2 men who had made the mistake of threatening people he cared about. The reports always read the same, layers of motive, leverage, exposure, carefully mapped vulnerabilities. This report had none of that. Dalila Adebola was, by every measurable standard, no one he should be thinking about. No strategic value. No political weight. No connection to any of the networks his family had spent 3 generations building and protecting, which made his interest in her difficult to explain, even to himself. He thought about the way she'd said "I literally didn't see," not as an apology, not as self-pity, but with the dry, tired patience of someone who had made the same correction 100 times and had long since stopped being embarrassed by it. He thought about the way she'd stood after the collision. Straight-backed, composed, her chin at a level that suggested she was not particularly interested in anyone's sympathy. He hadn't expected that. He wasn't sure what he had expected. Something softer, perhaps. Something more easily categorized. Instead, she had been sharp. And entirely unbothered by who he was, because she had no idea who he was. And that, Dong-hyun realized, sitting in the most secured office in one of Seoul's most powerful towers, surrounded by men who monitored threats across 4 countries, that was the most disarming thing anyone had done to him in years. He closed the file. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. Chairman Kong, your 3 o'clock has been rescheduled. Will you need the car? Dong-hyun looked at the window again. 45 steps from the tower entrance to the cafe. No, he said quietly. I'll walk. He reached for his jacket. Why am I thinking about her? He didn't have an answer. He went anyway. The cafe was called BOM. Spring in Korean. Dalila had chosen it for practical reasons. The layout never changed, the staff never rearranged the furniture, and the woman at the counter always said the usual before Dalila finished her sentence. Consistency was its own kind of kindness. She pushed the door open and began counting. 4 steps to clear the entrance mat. 7 more to the counter. Sharp left, 5 steps, second table from the wall. She'd worn a groove into this route over 8 months. Her cane found it without effort. The cafe was half full. She could hear it, the low overlap of 2 conversations, a spoon circling a ceramic cup, the hiss of the milk steamer running long. Comfortable sounds. Familiar weight. She ordered chamomile, paid, and turned toward her table. You're holding your cup with both hands again. Dalila stopped. She knew that voice. Low, calm. The particular stillness of someone who never needed to raise it to be heard. She turned toward it slowly. The coffee victim, she said. A pause. Then, and she heard it this time, fully. A quiet exhale that was almost a laugh. Not quite, but close enough to count. Is that what I am? He said. You spilled nothing, Dalila said, settling into her chair. I spilled everything. Victim seems accurate. She heard the soft drag of a chair from the adjacent table, unhurried, deliberate, and then the displacement of air that meant he had sat down. Close but not presumptuous. Careful distance. You come here often, he said. It wasn't a question. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she said. You. A beat. First time. Dalila wrapped both hands around her cup. The ceramic was warm. She said nothing because she had learned that silence, offered without filling it, told you more about a person than most questions could. He didn't rush to fill it either. What is it you record? He asked after a moment. The narration work. She looked up. Not at him precisely, but in his direction. The habit of a face-forward world she still half lived in. Documentaries, mostly. Educational series. Sometimes corporate audio guides for international companies. She tilted her head. It sounds less interesting than it is. Tell me why it's interesting. She paused. Most people asked about her blindness. They approached it like a wound they wanted to acknowledge but didn't know how to touch. This man had asked about her work. Because voice carries everything sight can fake, she said. A narrator can smile on camera and sound hollow, but in audio there's nowhere to hide. The listener hears what you actually mean. She ran her thumb along the curve of her cup. I find that honest. I like honest things. Silence again. You said you imagine colors, he said quietly. Before, in the plaza. You said that. Dalila blinked. She hadn't realized he'd heard that clearly. I didn't lose the memory of them, she said. Red still sounds like something urgent. Blue sounds like distance. Yellow? She almost smiled. Yellow sounds like this cafe at noon. She heard something shift in him. Not movement. Something underneath movement. A change in the quality of his stillness. No one has ever described it that way, he said. No one usually asks. The steamer hissed again across the room. Dalila finished her chamomile and set the cup down precisely in the center of its saucer. She didn't know what he looked like. She didn't know what he was thinking. She knew only that he had stayed, and that she hadn't minded. Across the table, Dong-hyun watched her gather her bag with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned to need very little from the world around her. He wanted to see her again. The thought arrived without permission. He didn't push it away. It became a Tuesday thing, then a Thursday thing. Then, quietly, without either of them naming it, it became an everyday thing. Dong-hyun started arriving before her. He told himself it was efficiency. He worked from his phone while he waited, cleared messages, reviewed briefs. This was true. It was also true that he had memorized the sound of the door at bomb opening, and that a particular quality of quiet settled over him when her cane tapped across the entrance mat. He never told her he arrived first. She never asked. Their conversations moved the way water moves, finding shape around whatever was in front of them. Never forced, never still. She told him about Lagos. Not the polished version people offered strangers, the heat, the traffic, the noise, but the real version. The inside version. The way her mother's kitchen smelled on Sunday mornings. The specific chaos of a Lagos go-slow. The way 30 lanes of traffic somehow negotiated themselves into motion through nothing but collective stubbornness. The sound of generators kicking on at dusk. The whole neighborhood exhaling together into the same voltage. Dong-hyun listened the way he did everything. Completely, without interrupting. "You miss it," he said once. "Every day," Dalila said. "But missing something and needing to go back aren't the same thing." He thought about that for longer than he expected to. She asked him once about music. What he listened to. He had answered truthfully, classical, mostly. Early morning, before the day became what it became. She had tilted her head at what it became but hadn't pressed. Instead she pulled out her phone and played him something. Afrobeats, layered and warm. The kind of song that moved through a room rather than filling it. He didn't recognize it. He told her so. She seemed genuinely appalled in a way that made him want to hear it again just to see her expression. These were the hours Dong-hyun had no name for. They didn't fit any category his life had previously offered. Not business. Not obligation. Not strategy. Just this. A woman across a table, speaking freely, asking nothing from him except his attention. He gave it without thinking. What he hadn't accounted for was how well she listened. Not just to words, to everything around words. She noticed, one Thursday, that the cafe had gone slightly quieter when they arrived together. She noticed that the staff moved differently near their table, attentive in a way that had a particular careful edge. She noticed that when his phone buzzed, the sound of it changed the air around him, the way pressure changes before weather. She said nothing for several days. Then one afternoon, while she was wrapping both hands around her chamomile in that precise way she had, she spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Why do people seem afraid of you?" The question landed without warning. Clean. Direct. The way Dalila always asked things, without cushioning, without apology, as though she had simply run out of patience for anything but the truth. Dong-hyun set his cup down slowly. He considered several answers. Each of them true. Each of them a door that, once opened, could not be closed again. He looked at her. Her face turned slightly toward him, patient, unhurried, giving him exactly as much silence as he needed and not 1 second more. "You ask difficult questions," he said finally. Dalila's mouth curved. "Barely. You didn't answer." "No," he said quietly. "I didn't." The Kong estate sat behind 2 sets of iron gates and a wall of pine trees old enough to have watched 3 generations of the family make decisions that didn't appear in any public record. Dong-hyun had grown up inside those walls. He had never once found them comforting. The summons came on a Friday evening. Not a call, not a message, but a car. Black, unannounced, idling outside Daesung Tower at 6:15 with his father's personal driver behind the wheel. Dong-hyun looked at it for a long moment before getting in. He already knew what it was about. Chairman Kong Byung-chul did not stand when his son entered the study. He sat behind the desk that had belonged to his own father, wide, dark, immovable as a verdict, and let the silence do its initial work. It was a technique Dong-hyun had watched him use on politicians, rival chairmen, and men who came to negotiate and left having agreed to terms they hadn't intended. The silence was designed to make people feel they had already lost something before a word was spoken. Dong-hyun sat down without being invited to. His father's eyes moved to him slowly. "I'll spare us both the pretense," Byung-chul said. I know about the woman. Dong-hyun said nothing. A foreign student. His father's voice carried the particular flatness of someone who had already completed their judgment and found it easy. Blind. No family connections here. No social standing. No strategic value to this family whatsoever. He set down his pen. And you have been seen with her. Repeatedly. In public. I have. Then you understand why I've called you here. I understand why you think you needed to, Dong-hyun said. I don't agree that you did. The temperature in the room dropped. Byung-chul leaned forward slightly. Not much, just enough to signal that the patient's portion of the conversation had ended. You control sensitive negotiations for 6 conglomerate families. You hold leverage over 2 sitting legislators. There are men in this city who would pay extraordinary sums to find a pressure point on you. His voice didn't rise. It never rose. And you have handed them one. Openly. Over chamomile tea. She has nothing to do with any of that. That is precisely what makes her dangerous. His father's eyes were steady. Unblinking. Power is not threatened by enemies, Dong-hyun. Enemies can be managed. Power is threatened by attachments. By people who make you hesitate. By blind spots. Pause, deliberate and precise. Particularly literal ones. Dong-hyun felt something harden in his chest. He had spent years learning to keep his voice level in rooms designed to destabilize him. He kept it level now. Dalila Adebola is a graduate student who records audio documentaries, he said. She doesn't know what I do. She has no connection to our networks, our partners, or our exposure. She is not a liability. She is whatever I say she is, Byung-chul replied. And I say she is a distraction you cannot afford. Dong-hyun stood. He buttoned his jacket, one button, slowly, and looked at his father across the enormous desk that had always been designed to make the person on the other side of it feel small. We're finished, he said. He turned toward the door. His father's voice followed him. Quiet. Final. Then remove her from your life. Dong-hyun's hand rested on the door frame for 1 second. He walked out without answering. But his father, who had read silence for 50 years, heard everything he needed to. The session ran 40 minutes over schedule. Dalila didn't mind. She preferred it when the work demanded more than expected, when a script required a third take because the emotion hadn't landed correctly the first 2 times, when the audio engineer asked her to slow down through a particular passage because something in her delivery had shifted and he wanted more of it. Being needed precisely was the closest thing to journalism she had left. She removed her headphones and set them on the console. Same time Thursday? The engineer asked. Thursday, she confirmed, reaching for her bag. Outside, Seoul was doing what it did at early evening, exhaling the workday in a long, collective breath. The streets had that particular quality of noise that meant the city was transitioning rather than stopping, layers of sound overlapping without quite resolving. Dalila stood at the top of the studio steps and oriented herself. 3 steps down, turn right, follow the wall to the corner, then the usual route to the subway. She reached into her bag for her phone to check the time. It buzzed once as her hand closed around it. A notification. Message. Unknown number. She pressed play on her screen reader. The automated voice read it back to her. Flat, unhurried, completely indifferent to what the words contained. Stay away from Kang Dong-hyun. This is your only warning. Dalila stood very still. Below her, a taxi horn sounded twice. Someone laughed loudly from inside a nearby restaurant. The city continued with complete indifference. She pressed the button again. Stay away from Kang Dong-hyun. This is your only warning. Same words. She had not misheard. Her hand tightened around the phone slowly. Not panic, not yet, but the particular careful stillness of someone whose mind is moving very fast while the body holds itself quiet. It was a habit she had developed after the accident, in the months when the world had suddenly become a place that required advanced planning before every movement. She thought about the cafe, about chamomile going warm in her hands, about a voice that never rushed and a silence that never pressed. She thought about the question she had asked 4 days ago. Why do people seem afraid of you? And the answer that hadn't come. She descended the studio steps slowly, cane finding each one, and turned right at the bottom. She walked, not toward the subway yet. She needed movement, needed the counting, needed the particular clarity that came from having to pay attention to where she was going. Because if she stopped moving, she would have to sit with what was forming at the edge of her thinking. The shape of it. Dong-hyun was not ordinary. She had known that, sensed it, in the way the cafe staff adjusted around him, in the way his phone changed the air when it buzzed, in the way silences near him felt supervised rather than empty. She had catalogued all of it and filed it under unusual and chosen, deliberately, not to open that file. Someone had just opened it for her. She stopped at a corner, waiting for the pedestrian signal's audio tone. He had a full name, Kang Dong-hyun. The message had used it the way messages used names when they wanted you to understand that they already knew exactly who they were talking about and why. The tone sounded. She crossed. Her mind stayed behind at the curb, circling the same question. The one she hadn't needed to ask before tonight because the warmth of his voice had made it feel unnecessary. Who is Kang Dong-hyun? Really? She didn't have an answer. For the first time since meeting him, that frightened her. The report was on his desk by 9 the following morning. Dong-hyun had been in the office since 6. He hadn't slept particularly well, a fact he noted without interest and filed alongside other facts that didn't require action. What required action was the photograph paper-clipped to the inside cover of the security brief. Surveillance still. Exterior of the recording studio on Mapogu. Timestamp. Previous evening, 1842. Dalila descending the studio steps. Phone in hand. Expression unreadable, but her stillness recognizable to him now. That specific quality of quiet that meant she was holding something difficult. He turned the page. The message had been traced to a burner. Purchased in cash, activated once, already dead. Professionally handled. The kind of operational hygiene that didn't belong to someone acting on personal grievance. His intelligence chief had flagged 3 possible sources before breakfast, all of them connected to rival networks that had, at various points, wanted leverage over Kang International and found none. They had found something now. Dong-hyun set the file down. He was not a man who experienced anger the way most people did. Loudly, visibly, in the moment. His anger was a quieter thing. It moved inward rather than outward, compressed itself into decision, and emerged only as action. He picked up his phone and made 2 calls. The first lasted 40 seconds. The second lasted less. By the time he set the phone down, a 4-person security detail had been assigned. A secondary surveillance sweep of Dalila's regular routes was underway, and every entrance to BOM Cafe had a plainclothes presence. Then he went to find her himself. She was already at the cafe when he arrived. He knew, from the set of her shoulders before he even spoke, that she had been expecting him, or rather, expecting something, which was not the same as being prepared for it. He sat down. Neither of them reached for a cup. "You already know," he said. "I got a message last night." Her voice was steady, carefully so. "Someone used your full name." "I know." Dalila's jaw tightened slightly. "Which means you had someone watching me." "I had someone watching for you." "There's a difference." "Is there?" Not a question. A verdict, still being considered. He let her have it. "Tell me the truth," she said. "Not the version you've been comfortable giving me. The actual truth. Who are you?" Dong-hyun looked at her. This woman who had walked into his world counting steps, who had spoken to him without fear because she had nothing to calibrate fear against, who had asked him honest questions and accepted honest silence as a temporary answer. The temporary was finished. He told her. Not everything, some walls didn't come down in a single conversation. But enough. Kang International. The underground network. The negotiations that happened in rooms that didn't appear on any calendar. The particular kind of power that functioned precisely because it stayed invisible. He watched her process it without speaking. When she finally exhaled, it was slow and very controlled. "I'm not part of your world," she said.
No.
"But someone is trying to use me against you." "Yes." Her cane was resting across her knees. Her hands had stilled on it completely, that deep, interior stillness he had come to recognize as Dalila thinking at full capacity. "I should walk away," she said. "You could," he said. "I wouldn't stop you." Silence. "But I won't let them reach you," he said quietly. "Whether you stay or go. That decision is already made." Dalila turned her face slightly toward him. "No one will harm you," he said. It wasn't a comfort. It was a fact. And somehow, that made it the most comforting thing anyone had said to her in years. She didn't come to the cafe on Thursday. Dong-hyun arrived at the usual time, ordered nothing, and sat for 40 minutes watching the door. Her chair remained empty in the particular way that empty chairs do when you are aware of exactly who should be sitting in them. He left without speaking to anyone. She called him that evening. Not a message, a call. Her voice when he answered was measured in the way that meant she had been preparing what to say. "I need to talk to you," she said. "Properly. Tell me where." She chose the Han River embankment. Neutral ground, open, public, the city visible in every direction. He understood the choice immediately. She wasn't hiding. She was making sure neither of them could. He found her by the sound of her cane on the footpath, standing at the railing with her face turned toward the water. He stopped beside her. For a while, neither of them spoke. Below, the river moved with quiet indifference. Across the water, Seoul glittered in long horizontal lines. Towers and bridges and the accumulated light of 11 million people going about lives that had nothing to do with any of this. "I've been thinking," Dalila said finally. "I know. Don't do that," she said. Not sharply. Just firmly. "Don't tell me what you already know. Let me say it." He was quiet. She turned slightly toward him, not quite facing him, the angle she used when she wanted to hear rather than perform. "I wanted a quiet life," she said. "That was the deal I made with myself after the accident. Give up the career. Give up the plan. Find something smaller and protect it carefully." Her hands moved on her cane. "I built something small. It wasn't what I imagined. But it was mine and it was stable and nothing in it was dangerous. And then you walked into me," Dong-hyun said. "And then I walked into you," she said. The river moved. "I'm not afraid of you," she said carefully. "I want to be clear about that. I've listened to your voice for weeks. I know the difference between a man who is dangerous and a man who carries danger. You carry it. You didn't choose to hand it to me." "No," he said. "I didn't. But someone handed it to me anyway." Her voice thinned slightly, the first fracture in the controlled surface. "And I don't know how to go back to counting my steps and recording voiceovers and pretending that message didn't arrive. I don't know how to unknow what I know about your world." "You can't," he said.
I'm sorry.
She exhaled. "Tell me honestly," she said. "Can you walk away from this? From whatever this is between us? Could you decide it's too complicated and simply stop?" The question sat between them. Dong-hyun looked at the water, at the lights, at the woman beside him who had walked into his world without armor, without agenda, without any of the calculation he had spent his entire adult life navigating, and had somehow, by being entirely herself, dismantled something in him that he hadn't known could be dismantled. "No," he said. Simple. Undecorated. "I've tried to find a reason to," he said. "A practical one. Something I could file and close." He paused. "There isn't one. You are not something I can reason my way out of, Dalila." She was quiet for a long time. The city hummed beneath them. Distant traffic. A boat moving under the bridge. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Not weak. Never weak. But the particular softness of someone setting down something very heavy they had been carrying alone. "I'm afraid," she whispered. A breath. "But I trust you." Dong-hyun didn't reach for her hand. He simply stayed exactly where he was, close enough to matter, still enough to mean it. That was enough. For now, that was everything. The meeting with his father lasted 8 minutes. Dong-hyun had not requested it. He had simply arrived, no appointment, no intermediary, no courtesy call to the estate ahead of time. The housekeeper had shown him in with the particular expression of someone who understood that certain conversations between these two men required no preparation because preparation would not help anyone. Byung-chul was at his desk. He looked up once and said nothing. Dong-hyun stood on the other side of the wide dark desk that had always been designed to make the person opposite feel outnumbered. He had spent years learning not to feel it. Today he didn't feel it at all. "Whoever sent that message to Dalila," he said, "came from within our network. You know this already." His father's expression remained composed. "I'm not here to confirm or discuss it," Dong-hyun continued. "I'm here to say one thing clearly, so there is no ambiguity between us." He held his father's gaze, steady, unhurried. "Dalila Adebola is untouchable. Not as a negotiation. Not contingent on anything. Permanently. If another message reaches her, if she is followed, frightened, inconvenienced in any way that traces back to this family or anyone connected to it, I will remove myself from every agreement, every partnership, every arrangement this family has built for 30 years. Completely. Publicly. Silence." "You would not," his father said. "I would," Dong-hyun said. "And you know I would. Because I am your son. And we do not make threats we are not prepared to keep." Byung-chul looked at him for a long moment, the look of a man recalculating, not retreating. Then he picked up his pen. "She must be remarkable," he said quietly. "She is," Dong-hyun said. He left without another word. He went directly to BOM. Dalila was already there. He heard her before he saw her, the soft tap of her cane across the entrance mat. For steps, the slight pause she always took to confirm the layout hadn't shifted. Then 7 steps to the counter, the brief exchange with the woman who always said the usual, the turn toward the second table from the wall. She settled into her chair. He sat down across from her. "You went to see him," she said. "Yes. And it's handled." Dalila was quiet for a moment. She wrapped both hands around her cup, chamomile still steaming. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. It cost you something. Some things are worth the cost." She didn't argue. She had learned, over these weeks, that Dong-hyun didn't say things for effect. Every word he offered was one he had already decided on fully. She thought about what it meant, that a man who moved governments and feared no one had walked into his father's estate and put everything he'd built on one side of a scale and put her name on the other. She thought about what blindness had taken from her. The career, the plan, the particular future she had mapped out at 22 with absolute certainty, the way only the young can be certain. She thought about what it had given her instead. The ability to hear intention in a voice, to feel the shape of a person's character through the way they occupied silence, to know without seeing what someone truly was. She couldn't see Dong-hyun. She had never seen him. She knew him entirely. "Ready?" he said quietly. She stood.
Gellert herbij.
Her cane found the floor. She began to count. 1, 2, 3. He fell into step beside her. Unhurried. Steady. Not guiding her, simply present. The way he had been, she realized from the very beginning. She reached the door. "I may not see the world anymore," she said softly. Her cane touched the threshold. "But somehow I found you." Behind her, BOM continued its quiet work. The steamer, the spoons, the low overlap of ordinary lives going about ordinary things. Ahead, Seoul opened wide. She stepped into it. And this time, she was not alone.